Hello, how is everybody doing? I am Christopher Balzano. Welcome to Tripping on Legends. Thanks for stopping by. I'm hoping that more and more people are coming to the live shows. If not, that is great. That is okay. That is fine. If you're listening on podcast, please follow me in social media. You can follow me, follow the show at least at Tripping on Legends at Facebook. That's probably the best place to get in touch with us, because that's when you'll hear when we're going to be doing live shows. And that way you can kind of stop in, get caught in on the action. If we're not saving it or sharing it to the Tripping on Legends, then you can find the information of how to get on my personal one, because I make these public. It's been a few weeks since we've done a show. It's probably been 2 months, I think, since we've done an episode show. We had the announcement probably about a month ago now. So why don't I start with that, because there's been a little bit of information about the book. Florida's Haunted Ghost Stories is at the publisher. So that's the first thing I wanted to get out of the way, because some people were asking about that. When is the book coming out? Things like that. So tonight, I decided to do something a little interactive. There's a poll actually in the chat room tonight, as well as when I repost this on different pages. For you guys to vote, because it's kind of interesting. There's a little bit of controversy, not sure if that's the best way to say it, a little bit of a debate going on at Arcadia History Press about when to release the book. And it's kind of a good thing, I think. It's a ghost book. So the logic says, and their kind of standard operating procedure says, that they want to release it around Halloween time, a little bit before Halloween time for the buildup of it. However, given the subject matter of the book, there is a push from the publisher, from some people within the publisher, to release it on Valentine's Day, because it is Florida's haunted love stories. So I would love to see you guys vote. That way I can kind of send it back to my publisher about what people think. So if you can't find the poll here, you'll find it when I repost it, or you can go on to Tripping on Legends on Facebook. You can go to Spooky Balzano on Twitter, and you can actually just hashtag Valentine's Day or hashtag Halloween time. So that would be a really cool, interesting way to get you guys involved and see when you think the book should come out. So that's the first thing I kind of wanted to get out there for people. So when do you think this book should come out? It's a little bit of a gimmick coming out on Valentine's Day. It's not like it's a big holiday movie where the book makes all its money and sells all its copies in the first week or something like that. But it is kind of a cool little thing. They don't really do that, but there are some people who say that might be a little interesting gimmick to get some pull behind the book. So Valentine's Day, hashtag Valentine's Day, hashtag Halloween time, or you can vote actually in the chat room itself. And if that doesn't work, let me know, because it seemed like I was just able to do it and people would be able to vote for it. So I'll give you the results after the show about that. The other thing is I wanted to say, just because the live show, so this is for the people who are kind of watching the live show or following it. Many of you know that my parents got into a car accident last night. This was originally scheduled for last night. I was unable to do it. My parents got into a car accident. There were a lot of things up in the air, so I couldn't really devote my attention to what was going on, because I was still getting updates. And so many of you reached out and wished my mother and my father good luck and sent your prayers and your good thoughts. And so I just wanted to say thank you for those of you, especially who are in the live chat, who reached out about that. My father's perfectly fine. He sustained some injuries. My mom had to stay overnight. This is her second night staying over in Boston, but she's expected to do okay as well. So thank you guys very much for that and for your continued support. If you want to call in to the show at all, you can feel free to do so at 813-418-6822 if you've got something to say about these legends. I know I've been getting a lot of Floridians from all across the state as friends and as listeners. So if you have something to say about these legends, something about the legends we're going to talk about tonight, or you have a similar one in Florida or wherever you are. The big thing about Tripping on Legends is these are stories that take place and take root and get traction in whatever community in Florida they happen to be in. But a lot of the themes and a lot of the ideas and a lot of the details, especially, are seen all across the country. And the two tonight are going to be excellent examples of that, especially the second one. Anyone who knows me knows that kind of where I made my bones when I first started to have an online presence. So that's a little teaser, although you can probably tell between that and the title that it's called Wandering Women what the second part, or the second legend that we're going to look into tonight, is all about. Both of these stories I discovered while I was doing research for the book. So they both have a twist of love. Not all Tripping on Legends stories are going to be about love. It's not like we're trying to cross promote everything. It just happens to be that so many are. And these two stories themselves I uncovered while I was writing the book, but I didn't have enough information. I hadn't been to either of the sites. I hadn't talked to the locals. I hadn't been able to get out to see kind of the context of these legends and see how they're rooted in the community, what the communities are all about. So I didn't include them, but I put them aside because I thought that these were two really interesting and strong stories for two very different reasons. And as I was, anyone who's following me on social media or following Tripping on Legends on social media, as I was doing some research on this week, kind of just doing some extra little odds and ends, I discovered a very odd connection between both of these stories, really, and kind of the dark shadow of Tripping on Legends. So anyone who's in the chat room right now, if you want to kind of put your guess at who or what the dark shadow, if you will, of Tripping on Legends is, comment now. This is almost like a little test to see how many of you are fans enough to know the episodes and to know the journey that Tripping on Legends has been on since its start. What is the dark shadow that hangs over the show to some degree? And spoilers, like, has popped up on episodes and popped up on legend trips that it wasn't supposed to show up on, and not Puckwudgies. So no one write Puckwudgies, because it's definitely not a Puckwudgie. Although that did come across in my research in some little way, but not really too much. The first one I'm going to talk about tonight is a story that I really have kind of become fascinated with, and it's not my normal kind of in my normal train of thought, but I've been seeing more and more of it, and so I thought it would be a really interesting one to look into, especially because it's taken root in this community and it's pretty popular. It's funny because I was doing both of these stories and researching them entirely separately, and then I found out that they were like within 2 pages of each other or something ridiculous like that in Weird Florida. So both of these stories have been covered before, but they're so different in their online life than they are in that book that they're worth looking into, especially worth going into those communities and see what it's like. So we're going to travel to some place that Tripping on Legends has actually been before, and that's Sanford, Florida. So Sanford, Florida is kind of outside Orlando. Let's say it's enough. It's in Seminole County, so it is north of Orlando. And if you have heard the episodes, which is one of my favorite kind of got really good evidence episodes, when we're doing our summer road trip in 2017, this was the one we did before we got out of state. Went to Shiloh Cemetery in Sanford, and we were on the hunt for a red-headed skeleton girl ghost who was supposed to be the victim of a murder and dumped into the water somehow, or related to water. The fish had eaten her flesh off, and she was just a skeleton in the cemetery. We went there on our way out of Florida. We were like, let's hit one in Florida so we could stop, get something to eat. But I don't think we actually ate when we were there, like in that town. But Sanford, Florida is a really haunted place. There are a lot of ghost stories that are coming out of there. There are multiple ghost tours. So this might be a place that when I go, I'm going to maybe spend the night over there and hit up some of these ghost tours, because those people always like to promote, always like to talk. And the story that's bringing me there takes place on Celery Road. From my research, I've been able to find that Sanford used to be the celery capital of the world. Talk about like the most boring possible tag you can get for someone. Sanford, Florida, the celery capital of the world. And much of the industry revolved around that. However, there was a guy, and I've seen it spelt differently, named Sly Ernest. Now, Sly Ernest was a blacksmith, and he was known throughout the town for having a 3,000-pound white horse. I don't know if 3,000 pounds is big for a horse. I know it's big for a human, but big for a horse, I mean, I would imagine so. That's more than a ton. So the horse weighed more than a ton and a half. And this was his pride and joy, and I guess to some degree was pretty famous in the town of Sanford at the time, as Sly was as well. I wasn't able to find a solid date on this, but I was going back to when Sanford was founded. I have not been able to find this name in any reference whatsoever, no newspapers, not his death, not the death of his horse, which seemed to have been a big thing depending on which story you listen to. So I'm not even really sure if this is a real person. So if you know Sly or you know someone who knows Sly, feel free to contact me about it. But the story goes that he was a blacksmith and his horse died. Now, there are a few different stories about why the horse died. Most of the stories don't say how it passed at all. It just takes place from the moment that the horse dies. Other people say that it was run too hard. Other people say there's one story out there that there was some kind of jealousy going on, and so the horse itself was killed. That we're going to get back to that version of the story because I think that's borrowing from another legend, which is kind of popular among some of the Native Americans in that area. I guess this was a big deal that the horse died. And for reasons unknown, it was it needed to be buried in a special place. Now, the burial part's going to be important because it hits on different legends. So which track this legend goes down is all going to depend on where you think the horse was buried. One said it was just buried in an odd place, but just in the ground. The other, so that's one kind of path. These are going to go all over the place, right? There's a whole bunch of different stories connected with all these. The other is that it was buried intentionally or unintentionally on a burial mound or burial ground for Native Americans. So the horse itself had kind of disturbed the territory or disturbed the burial grounds of the Native Americans. And that's why this gigantic behemoth white horse is known to come back to life. So this spectral stallion, see what I did there, rides up and down Celery Road, which is, I guess, one of the main roads in Sanford, or at least like a famous road in Sanford that connects all this stuff. So it goes up and down. Sometimes the horse is ridden by a Native American. Sometimes the horse is accompanied by another horse that's smaller that seems to be racing it or following it. One of the really disturbing variations of the legend I found was that it was a Native American who had a black hole for a face. Now, I saw this reference a few different places, a black hole for a face, black hole for a face. And they never explain exactly what they mean by a black hole. So does that mean that it's a blank face? Does that mean that it's somehow like some kind of like weird, kind of like anti-opposite Slender Man, so instead of a white face, it's just got a plain black face? It doesn't say, nor does it say how they know it's a Native American if it's got no physical features on the face. But we're not going to get into that. We'll let history do that one. So the story goes, the different variations of the story go that the horse was so gigantic and it had to be buried in this place for some reason that it had to be dragged all across the road of Celery Road, like the entire length of Celery Road to get to where the burial place was. And that disrespect for the horse has caused it to somehow be disturbed. Like its spirit is restless because it was disrespected in death. Another version of it says that it was buried on the side of the road. And then in modern times, the road was widened. And when the road was widened, it plowed over where the horse had been buried. Now, why they went all this way and then buried the horse on the side of the road, I'm not sure. There are different stories. Some say it was like dragged by tractors. Others that, like, the people lined the street because the story was horse was so famous as it was going. Either way, most of the stories talk about the fact that the road is widened, and that's when the activity started. Now, we've covered one ghost horse on Tripping on Legends. It was the episode, I believe it's called Where's the Dead Man's Oak, I think is the name of the episode, where we talked about this headless horseman who is in Kissimmee, which is the opposite side of Orlando. So kind of like Orlando's in the middle. They're almost equidistant from each other, I think. And so there's this connection between those because they both have this horse, although I can't remember the color of the horse on that one. However, there are other white horses. When I was writing Ghostly Ventures, there was a story of a white horse in Texas. And it was a very similar kind of thing. The horse had been disturbed. It had been buried. The burial ground for the horse itself had been disturbed. And just like when a human is disturbed, they don't like it. And so this horse came back, and it would ride up and down. It would ride free. And then when people tried to catch it or approach it, it would just kind of disappear. So there's this very interesting aspect of these horses, and I wish, we're so connected to Brandy Stark, and so I would love to get her opinion on this, and maybe potentially even go over this with her paranormal pets. So there's a deeper tradition of ghost horses, especially in the Native American community. I'm going to let that sit for a moment while I drink my coffee. In folklore and legends, white horses seem to play a big part. If you are a fan of Norse mythology at all, it's like second to the origin story. All the books that talk about Norse mythology, before they even get into Thor or anything like that, they get into this horse that is tricked into building their palace. And I wish, if there's anyone in Norse mythology who's in the audience who wants to tell me the name of it, I can't remember. But their castle, kind of their version of Olympia, is built by this gigantic horse. And if I'm remembering the story correctly, the horse is gets some exuberant price if it finishes in a certain amount of time. And on the last day, it's this gigantic horse, and it's putting all the stones, and it's building it really fast. On the last day, I believe, because it would make sense, Loki turns himself into a beautiful female horse and lures the white worker horse away. And then it's not finished in time. And so they get it for free. So there's that, but there's the deeper tradition. And so I was actually able to find, because I wanted to know why this story might have been intertwined and interconnected to the story of Native Americans, like how Native Americans might have done this. The very first reason is Sanford seems to be a place that is very much aware of the fact that they screwed stuff up with Native Americans. That a lot of the mounds that were there, a lot of the burial grounds that were there got disrupted, and that they kind of almost have a black mark on their community. Maybe that's why their town is so haunted. Maybe that's just what they promote as why their town is haunted. But there definitely seems to be a little white man's guilt, which we've talked about a lot in the town of Sanford, because everything seems to mention, even if it's not talking about the horse or a Native American connection to the horse, they find some way in the article or the story to talk about the fact that there's all these Native Americans that are Native American stories and Native American ghosts because so much was disrupted. So there's definitely a connection between that. So I wanted to see if there were potentially other stories in Florida, in the South, in the country in general, about white horses. Now, it's interesting. In British culture, in British folklore, it is bad luck to engage a white horse. It's almost like the exact opposite of cats, right? So black horses are good luck, white horses are bad luck. So you're supposed to avoid a white horse at all costs, which is really interesting because you would think it's the opposite, right? Like white horse, beautiful, all that kind of stuff like that. Although I guess there is more, there are more stories about beautiful Black Beauty and all those kind of things, Black Velvet, which I don't know if that's the name of it. But these white horses are supposed to be bad luck, which is interesting because if you look at like the Dictionary of Omens, for example, Dictionary of Omens, this is kind of like one of my Bibles. This is something I go to all the time to kind of reference what might be going on with something or what something might mean. If you go to that, it says what white horse is a symbol of bad luck. If you go to dream encyclopedias, white horses are a symbol of love and kind of like yearning love. I get the impression looking at some of these Native American legends that the white horse was the coveted horse. Colleen has said the natives also held great respect for their horses. We're going to get to that because that's part of the story that actually connects to this area, the area of Sanford to some degree. One of the stories I was able to come across comes from a few different tribes, but also comes from the Creek. So if you know anything, the Creek, and they don't get specific about which creek it is, so I'm going to do the one that the one that benefits me the most, because some of the Creek come down and they become the Seminole County, Florida. So why don't we say it was these creeks that came up with this story or had this story. And the story is about a stranger. He's called the Traveler. So it never gets clear of why they call him the Traveler. But the Traveler comes down and he basically is very, unlike everyone else, he's very money hungry, which is not something you see a lot of in Native American folklore. He's very money hungry. He's kind of a jerk, and he drives a hard bargain. Like everything says that he's like, that he's very much like stingy. He's almost like the Scrooge of the tribe, and he has a passion for his horses. Now, one of his things is that he often will gyp people of money, and then when those people can't pay or his price then becomes too high, he then takes the horses that are their best horses. The story goes that he did this, and he kind of tricked this guy out of this beautiful white horse. And then for reasons that are kind of unclear, he lets the horse die. It's kind of this like vicious thing where he actually beats the horse. So I guess that is kind of clear, although it's unclear of why he does it, but he basically beats the horse to death. I think because the horse wasn't showing him respect or all that, I don't know, something like that. And so he goes back to bury the dead body because he feels guilty, and the horse is gone. And the horse continues to haunt his dreams for 3 nights. Now, the 3 thing, I haven't seen a lot of 3 things in Native American lore. I'm wondering whether this is kind of like a Europeanization, if I can make up a word, Europeanization of a Native American legend, or like maybe they borrowed some of it, maybe they took some of it, and they essentially the horse visits him 3 nights in a row, and every night, the first night he takes all the horses away. The next night he forces him to go out into the woods and look for the horses, and the third night he kind of does the same thing, and then he says, "You will never have another animal again." And so the story goes that the Traveler keeps trying to get horses. Every horse he gets dies, or he can't get access to it. So it's this idea that he had this horse, he didn't show respect for it, and then the horse essentially comes back and punishes him by taking all of his wealth, all of his money, and allowing him to never have a horse again. So there you go. And it's a white horse, and it's from the same area. So that was really the only kind of strong story I was able to find in connection to that. I want you as I go into the next one to keep in the back of your mind Sanford, Shiloh. If you're a fan of the show, you might know where this next one is going, and you might already have your clue as to what the as to what what the picture I posted earlier and what the connection is to an older dark thing that's kind of hovering over Tripping on Legends for like the last 2 years. Let's go on to our next one, because the next one is really what I wanted to talk about. I originally came at these at the same time, so I thought I would include them in the same episode because they are very close to each other. But we're going to travel now to Lake County, Florida. So this deserves a little bit more of a preface, hence a little bit more coffee. You have no idea, even as a teacher, how difficult it is to talk for like 45 minutes, hours straight. When we went to speak at the Astor Library years ago, I mean, probably, I'm not sure if it was, I think it was after I think it was between the road trips. Because I know road trip 2018 was kind of focused on Lake County in that area in Central Florida. We were introduced to this idea of the Ocala forest and just how screwed up the Ocala forest is. And when I suggested books for my first book with Arcadia History Press, one of the things I pushed was either Haunted Love or something that's kind of in the feel of Dark Woods, but around the Ocala State Forest. This place is messed up. You can follow any of our episodes that talk about it. There are so many dark stories that are coming out. So there's a lot of ghostly legends. Some we followed up on, some we haven't followed up on. But there's something wrong in that place. It's different than the Freetown State Forest, but there is definitely something going on there. And like I said, as I was just looking at the stories that we have and the legends that Tripping on Legends has been following, and I've been following, so many are in this area, and there's so many to follow up with. One of the ones that I came across, it comes from Lady Lake, Florida. So this is right outside the Ocala, but definitely in the Ocala area, the Ocala halo, we can call it, kind of the circle around it. And this is the ghost of Rolling Acres Road, which is also known as Route or Road 441. Anyone who's in Florida, anyone who's covered Florida, knows of this place. And originally, I thought it was just going to be this quick like drop in. I almost in the book wanted to have like just a little thing where I had like little side things where it was like, exact. This is the Florida version of the Freetown State Forest for sure. I almost wanted to call it Darkwoods 2, the Florida one, but I'm horrible with titles. If you have been following me since the beginning, which none of you have because I was unknown back then, right? And I definitely wasn't in Florida. I started talking about Bridgewater Triangle legends. That was kind of like my first thing, and that's what people wanted to hear about. And so the first big heartbeat of Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads was a retelling and a furthering of the red-headed hitchhiker of Route 44, which when I first started was kind of more the red-headed phantom of Route 44, and over time, and I'm not sure if it was me writing about it as the hitchhiker phantom or other people, but it's known by both of them. If you do not know this legend, if you do not know this ghost story, look it up. You won't find my stuff anymore because it's been much more covered, but at the time, other than New England Ghost Files and my website, there wasn't a lot of information out there. So people knew this story in that area. People supposedly were still experiencing it, and they would search, and I would be the only thing that came up online. And so that site became popular because so many people were hitting it. It's kind of our version of, it was kind of like Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads version of the Devil's Tree. Hint number 2. So I was obsessed with roadside ghosts. That changed a little bit over the years, but I became known as kind of an authority on roadside ghosts because I did so much research trying to figure out, it was the very definition of crossroads, right? Because people were experiencing that ghost or said they were experiencing that ghost, but then every possible roadside ghost theme was attached to it. And so even though it wasn't part of the early lore, all of a sudden you could go honk your horn 3 times, shut off your lights, turn them back on again, and he would appear. Or if you were driving with 3 people, he would appear in the empty seat. These stories were not part of the lore of that ghost, and yet they became part of it. Or that he would appear and enter and exit and maybe even say Jesus is coming. All these different stories that are famous for hitchhiker legends all started to kind of superimpose themselves on what Robinson had originally documented in that book, which I had kind of just really kind of copied it. And then as more people were reporting, I would just kind of add to the lore. And so it became this monster. And in doing that, I became obsessed with roadside ghosts. And actually, the theme song for Tripping on Legends is, or was inspired by one out in California. So it's definitely something that's always been in the background. This, I thought, was just going to be your average kind of roadside ghost. So in a very basic way, a basic version of the story, there is a ghost named Julie or Julia, and she is seen walking this stretch of road, generally the east side of Rolling Acres, which I gather is now like really, really rural. Not that Lady Lake is not rural to begin with. She is seen either dressed all in white or illuminating white. So already in your mind, you should be thinking Resurrection Mary. You should be thinking kind of all these other white ghosts, right? I think we did do a show called Why Are All the Ghosts White? Why Are All the Women White? Which you can look at. And she's seen walking this stretch of road. She's also been known to get into cars. She's been known to be stopped and ask for help and then fade away. People in that area have heard screams from the woods and growls as well, screams and growls from the woods. The story, kind of like the legend trip of the town, is you go to the area late at night, you turn off your car, you roll down the windows. Now I guess you roll down the windows and turn off your car, and you'll hear the growling and the screaming from the woods. And this is something that people used to do quite often, kind of like the Oviedo Lights. And this is actually not that far from Oviedo. People have also heard screaming of "help me" from the woods. Cars have had problems, kind of they've stalled or gaskets have blown. I don't even know what a gasket is, but gaskets tend to get blown there. The weird thing is temperature changes. The weird thing is that the houses around this area also report the same woman appearing in their living rooms, appearing in their bedrooms. They attribute it to the same person, to this Julie or Julia who supposedly walks this road. Now, there's also kind of a secondary one, and it's really hard to tell the connection between these, of a little girl as well. And that little girl has been known to yell "Papa." Now, if you follow any of the threads in any of these sites, whether it's haunted.com or ghoststories.com or any of the ones we look at, they generally tend to have a whole bunch of people saying, "I experienced this. This is stupid. I've lived the town the whole time." People say that the woods themselves are haunted. Said that those woods, which I'm trying to tell from the geography, I'm not exactly whether the woods that they're talking about are an extension of the Ocala forest, or whether they're just kind of like next to it or near it. But people say the woods themselves are haunted, and the little girl might be part of that, or even Julia might be part of that. I'm gonna go to the kind of backstory of Julia before I get into something very mysterious that is there that I'm now having a theory on. I've got a theory. Okay, my first time doing that in a while. So, Julia is. There are three main things that might be the kind of tragedy that has befallen Julia. All of which I've tried to follow up on, and all of which have kind of come up empty. The first is that she was murdered by a jealous lover. This seems to be the most popular one, that she was, there was a man, and the man loved her, and she loved him, but she fell out of love, and she either married or kind of just started being with another guy. And that this man was so jealous of that he killed her. Now, the town itself is kind of became incorporated, kind of had its rise in 1883. And I've been able to look back at newspapers from 1883, and I have found no murder of a person named Julie or Julia by a jealous lover. I don't know what that was. That was very weird. Hear that? Okay. So that's all of these have not been able to follow up on. The other is that Julia was hit by a car. And so she continues to be on that road. She can't escape that road. This is the road where she died, and therefore she's kind of trapped there. The other one is that, you guys are going to recognize this. She loved a man, but she was killed by the man she loved. And she was killed by the man she loved. And here's the weird, I guess it's maybe not that weird, but it's kind of odd given some of these stories. She was killed by the man she loves because they couldn't get married. Her parents hated him for some reason. Oh, okay. And so they weren't able to get together. The parents were keeping them apart. Now, usually in that situation, you have a suicide, which is also, there is a legend that Julia killed herself. But it's very rare that you have these two sides arguing and it ends with one side killing the other side. You know, specifically the two lovers killing each other, or one killing the other. So it's kind of an odd legend that way, in that there's this weird thing of the man kills Julia because they can't be together. Now, 1883 is not that long ago, right? So it seems really weird that they just don't move or do something else. So this whole idea, now maybe he was mad that she didn't stand up for him, Stand By Your Man had not been written yet, maybe. That she didn't just say no, Mom, I throw off my name. I'm gonna be the Rose I want to be, and leave. But that's the story that goes around. So I'm gonna get into the history of Lady Lake a little bit, because I've become a little bit fascinated by it, and I've been fascinated. It's called the Gateway to the Villages. And if you don't know the Villages, and I don't know that much except for the research I've done in the last week, the Villages are a retirement community which seems to have been carved out of nothingness. It seemed to have had nothing that happened before it until all of a sudden someone came whose name I can't even bother to see how I spelt it. And now it's this place, the Villages. And everyone knows someone who lives in the Villages, or their parents are in the Villages, or, people are always saying you got to go to visit so-and-so in the Villages. And this is the gateway to that. So it seems to be this weird, half stuck in old Florida, half transitioning to this weird, odd, haven for retirement. That is what Florida is now. Around 1883, the Tropical Railroad kind of goes through there, builds a station. The train station wants to call it Cooper, Florida. And the people who have already started settling there, this is kind of weird right here, want to instead name it Lady Lake. Now, people said that if you look at it from above, that it looks like a lady's head. I don't know how many people were in air balloons back then checking out what it looked like. So the going story is that the Native Americans had already called this body of water that was where that town is Lady Lake. And they called it Lady Lake because, and this is always how it's phrased, that a white woman had died in the lake. So I don't know what they called it before the white woman came, but it's always phrased that a white woman died in the lake, and so they decided to call it Lady Lake. And so the people took that name instead. There have been a lot of accidents, it seems, on this stretch of road, Rolling Acres Road. Most people who are posting about how dangerous it actually is. So you have this kind of, a little girl has died there, which is where the little girl legend comes from. No woman named Julia has been documented as having died in a car accident there, either being hit or being in a car itself, which only kind of accounts for a small amount of the legends that she was hit by the car anyway. It seems to be kind of like the skinny one that sneaks its way through. So there's a real danger to this. There's also a danger of attacks, things like that. It is a wooded area. So it's going to be a little dangerous to go out there and do this one. I'm definitely going to go during the day to get a feel for it and then kind of go back at night. A lot of crosses in the area for people who have been hit, things like that. Now, there is another story that takes place on the same stretch of road. So Julia, or Julie, is not alone, and the little girl is not enough. There is sometimes described as a man with a beard and a cloak, more often described as just a hooded dark figure that people compare to the Grim Reaper. I have seen this hooded man, and anyone who is into folklore or ghost stories, especially in Central Florida, has probably seen or heard this story pop up or this guy pop up. There is this hooded man who also walks the road. He's never actually seen with Julia, but he's seen more frequently. So in more recent days. Now, what those recent days are, we don't know, right? However, this hooded man, this hooded figure, has shown up in at least 6 other stories that I know of about haunted locations, and he's always the secondary character. So, for example, in Astor, he is seen in different places. He's seen on the Gobbler Road. He's part of the Gobbler Road story. Now, that has a legend of a dead monk, but not hooded. The monk there is not hooded. Also, he's seen in different camp places throughout the Ocala Forest. So it seems to be this, it's almost like it's a shadow person or a version of a shadow person who seems to be the secondary character in all of these other stories. Like there's a haunted legend that goes on, and this hooded person is there to follow, observe, feed off of, depending on like where your ideas fall and that kind of thing. And I'm starting to get a potential theory. So this might just be a legend, right? You have that. This might be some kind of elemental. Like when I talked about the Pukwudgies and I started hearing more shadow people references in the same places as Pukwudgies, I started connecting the two of them. And then when I read about them in the haunted Narrow Land, they were connected, right? They said it was the devil. The devil was in control of the Pukwudgies and all this kind of stuff, or observing them. This bearded man, I think, is a specific someone, potentially. And I think it's someone who has kind of been the hooded dark man of the show. So I know I have some people in here. I know I have some fans in here. I don't know if you're fans or at least you've listened to the show. Can anyone think of who might be a perfect candidate to be this hooded man who is seen all throughout Central and Upper Central Florida, who seems to be at all these dark places? Anybody? Anybody? He waits dramatically. I'm going to take a drink while I see if there's anyone out there that wants to try to take a guess at this. No? Okay. I'll spoil it for you. In my research, I came across a reference to, it's the picture that I posted, a reference to a Lake County sheriff, a Lake County search and rescue, looking for 2 missing women. So 2 missing women, one of which is Nancy Lechner, and the other is Pamela Nader. And they disappeared. This is maybe going to give you some hints. They disappeared on October 2nd, 1966. They were in Altoona, and they were at a picnic table. They were skin diving, which I think is not skinny dipping. I think there's a difference. When I hear skin diving, the only thing I think of is Zodiac, when their main suspect was like, yeah, I skin dive there all the time. So I don't know what it actually is. Sounds hot, though. They were skin diving with a group. Oh, I forgot to write the name of the group. It was like the Aqua Fiends or something like that. And they were at a picnic table. They walked out into the woods together. All their stuff was on the table, like their glasses. One of them had glasses. Their driver's licenses. Not driver's license. Other kind of stuff of theirs disappeared. And they searched the entire area for this. Now, Altoona is only about a half hour from Lady Lake, so that's kind of a big distance, but I believe they're connected by the forest. And so therefore, there were people checking out areas in Lady Lake as well. And the final decision, if you will, on this is that they must have drowned in some body of water. Now, these people were going out there to skin dive. These people were known as expert swimmers. There's no way they would have drowned. So in recent days, because of information that is unclear and unreleased for one reason or another, they believe that their disappearance was the work of a serial killer. That serial killer would be John Gerald Schaefer, or Gerald John Schaefer. So Gerald Schaefer is once again making an appearance on Tripping on Legends. We cannot get rid of this guy. He seems to be following us everywhere. It's a really, it's one of those things. As soon as I did it, I literally was in my classroom, came across this information. No students were there. I slammed the desk and I went #follow the science, because it was that in my, like, whoa, it's another Schaefer reference. And it was one of those things that you just fall upon. Schaefer, I believe, was also with us. If you don't know him, he is a serial killer in Florida who's finally charged with the murder of 2 women. And it is said that he killed the women in Port St. Lucie that led to the infamous Devil's Tree. Notice the clue from earlier. Devil's Tree, also a place where a hooded man is seen. And once again, keep in mind, I was researching these 2 separate. I wanted to present them together, but they were 2 very separate legends. We saw, or we heard from, I believe, Schaefer when we were at Shiloh Cemetery in Sanford. So once again, these all seem to point at, there might be more to this guy that than we know of. There might have been a lot more murders, but there seems to be some kind of darkness that follows stories that are connected to him. And it's really interesting too, because there was something in there, and I'm trying to remember my research. I'm going to have to go back to it, whether they found these women's driver's license, which is why I retook the driver's licensing back. There seems to have been some evidence found. Now, we know that there was evidence found when they shook down and they searched his mom's apartment, or his mom's mobile home, and that's what convicted him a lot of things and connected him to different murders that they didn't convict him for. He's dead now, but since then, it's almost like they consider it a closed case. Now, if that's the case, and Julie is some kind of victim of his, whether it's an undiscovered body or whether it's something like that, it would make a lot more sense. And either way, it makes sense for the screaming in the woods and why these woods might be haunted. This might have been another one of those grounds, another one of those hunting grounds for Schaefer. So that's definitely something I'm going to be looking into a little bit more. This story seems to be pretty prevalent in the community. Most of the people seem to know this story and talk about it. It's not hidden at all. So this is definitely one of those stories where I need to go there during the day, and I'm actually speaking at the town next to this, not the villages. So I don't know if I'm going to hold out until I'm actually at the conference. It's really weird. When I'm in that area, I'm doing 2 shows that are over at like 5. Then the next morning, I'm doing another 2 shows, and they're actually paying for me to spend the night. So it might be a really excellent opportunity for me to try to hit this one then, but I'm kind of excited to go out there. So I kind of want to go out there like tonight, even though it's 11 o'clock at night. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Either way, these are 2 stories that have a lot of interesting follow-up. You can tell that when we get there, or when we're there, when Tripping on Legends is there, that there's going to be a lot of context in the area themselves to pull from. These are 2 I feel you really need to go out into the field and see them. So I will keep you guys up to date with that. You can keep up to date with everything that Tripping on Legends is doing by following us on any of our multiple social media platforms. You can email us at spookytripping@gmail.com. Spookytripping is also our Instagram. So we're doing a lot of, there you go. What did I say? You always find someone who's connected to the villages somehow. Instagram's I put out a lot of good pictures there. Facebook is kind of really our one-stop shop. So it's facebook.com/trippingonlegends. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at spookybalzano. And of course, the website is trippingonlegends.wordpress.com. And as always, or I shouldn't say as always, or as new, you can always call if you have a story or you have a question about what's going on, or you just want to share something. And the number is 813-418-6822. So there's a lot of ways to get in touch with Tripping on Legends, be part of the story, be part of what's going on, because that's how these stories roll, right? Like you hear one thing, it sparks some memory of yours, and that's kind of what brings the journey of Tripping on Legends to its highway. So that is it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed what I had here for you. Please follow us. I don't know quite yet what the hashtags are going to be for these legend trips, but I'll let you know about that. And here's hoping that all your trips are legendary. Should I play the music going out? Let's play the music going out, just because, now we got it going on, so we got to do that. So back to the beginning. Let me try that again. See, even when I'm by myself, I still screw up the endings. Here's hoping all your trips are legendary. I'm hoping to get advertised. Tinder is not doing it, so I'm hoping maybe Dunkin' Donuts will potentially sponsor us. Watching. I'm going to stay in the chat in case anyone wants to talk about the show or what have you. I'm going to end the live video and end the show, but the rest of you guys can kind of stay on if you want to discuss tonight's episode.